Hey friends, David Watts here with not another Luminar video, but actually this time just a video I mentioned should make, and others have asked for some more videos about photography around New York City. So this one is really just a highlight of some of the great areas you can photograph around the Dumbo area in Brooklyn, just across the water from what we think of as New York City proper. So I'll share some of these locations. I'll also show images I've taken in these areas. I'll share some tips and tricks and some advice, and hope it's helpful to you. If you're either living in the New York City area, you may be very familiar with these spots. But if not, and you get there just very briefly, it's good to have some tips and tricks to make the most of your time. So hope this will help a little bit. If you like what I'm doing, subscribe for more. Give us a thumbs up. We appreciate that. So a couple things I should point out, and you're looking at my screen right now, and so this is Dumbo, D-U-M-B-O. It stands for Down Under the Manhattan Bridge Overpass. And generally speaking, it is this area around the Brooklyn Bridge and the Manhattan Bridge where they come together. Previously, this was a heavy sort of industrial and warehouse area. I started going there maybe 8 to 10 years ago for photography purposes, and it felt a little sketchy at the time, a little dark, nobody else was around. But every time I go back, and I go back quite frequently, more and more people, lots of tourists. It feels like a very safe area. I'm not saying nothing could never happen, but it generally feels safe. Be smart as always. I should also emphasize these are, in my view, nighttime locations. That's the special aspect of photography from this area for me, is nighttime photography. And it works nicely to go after work, or maybe if you're there on tourism, do your regular tourism things, and then get here after dark. So, all right, a couple of thoughts. First of all, how to get here. And you don't want to try to drive or park. If you do, you can probably find some parking. I've done that once or twice, but it can be a hassle. Take the subway would be my recommendation. I usually come out at this High Street station, which is on the A and C line. And you'll see it comes across from Manhattan. So if you're staying around Times Square or somewhere else in that area, take the work your way over to the A and C line and get off at High Street. When you get out at High Street, whichever way you come to High Street, then you'll just want to walk up the main road here, which is Cadman Plaza, and around the corner you'll go under the freeway and basically come right down to this corner about where my mouse is. Now, you'll know you're in the right place. Look for Shake Shack, and if you haven't been, go have a nice burger at Shake Shack. You can get a good root beer and take a few minutes and enjoy the views and just nice burger. Okay, so here's the thing. As a starting place, what I usually do, if you can see the map properly there, I usually start right about here. There is, by the way, a little ferry service, boat ferry service that runs from this dock back across. You might try that. I've never done that. But anyway, I usually walk to right about here, this corner where you see my mouse, and you'll get great views of Manhattan. Let me flip over to Luminar. It's not really a Luminar video, but I'll show you this in Luminar if I can get it to cooperate with me. There we go. All right, that's not the video I want to show just yet, but that is one we'll look at. Let me thumb through these real fast. Okay, so this was an image I took a few weeks back from this very location that I'm describing. Let me go back to the map for a second. Right here at this corner. Now, a couple of things. First of all, I hate traveling with a tripod. I hate the weight and just the extra piece of gear to lug around. So there is a railing all along this park area, and of course every so often, every 8 or 10 feet, there's a post, and thankfully the post is flat, so you don't need a tripod. Set your camera there. You might use a little something under the lens to prop it up a bit to give you a better angle to take a picture of the city there. You want to get enough of the water, get enough of the skyline, but you don't need to lug around a tripod, at least for the spots I'm going to show you. Gear really is not that essential for these pictures. I would propose to you that I could get this basic image with most any camera. Here's some key recommendations. Number one, if you have optical image stabilization, turn it off. You want to use a long exposure so that the water blurs out and you capture these reflections. So you're interested in a higher f-stop, a small aperture like f8 or maybe 11, or it could be f9 or 11 or 13, something of that sort, so that you get a nice long exposure. You'll want to set your ISO if you have a camera that does automatic ISO. You'll want to set it to something like 200 or 400, or maybe if you have good noise control, maybe 800. If you can go as low as 100, do that. And that'll give you, usually at 200 with f8 or f9 or f11, somewhere in there, you're talking around an 8-second exposure, something like that. Long enough to give you a nice blur, not long enough that you're bored to death. And you want to take multiple shots, of course. The other thing I would do, turn on your self-timer. Hopefully you have a 2-second self-timer, if you have a 10-second, if that's all you got, use it, but the 2-second is nice. With your camera nice and stable on top of the post, framed up as you want, hit the shutter button, back your hands away from it. I would encourage keep the strap around your neck or keep the strap somewhere, but don't have tension on it, otherwise you'll cause vibrations. Keep the strap close to you or around you somehow so that you don't lose your camera in the water. Anybody could bump you and you'd hate to see your camera go over in the water. Anyway, the other thing I do with my exposure compensation dial on my Fuji is I will usually go maybe +1 on the exposure, because usually, at least for me with a Fuji, the automatic exposure tends to make the image a little dark. It sees a lot of dark, and there is a lot of dark. The sky's dark, the water's dark. But by bringing that up a bit, maybe +1, you can experiment with that. I think you'll get a better image. And I shoot in RAW typically, but you can get a great picture in JPEG. So those are a few suggestions, and most of those apply for each of these locations that we'll chat about. Make sure you get a good sharp focus. Again, 2-second self-timer. Push the button, get your hands off of it, keep it nice and steady, of course, and you'll get a great image like that. So let me go back to the map. And again, we're talking about this corner right about here. And if there's a lot of people around, you can work your way down this area and get slightly different angles. But all of the angles will be about the same. You will, by the way, sometimes if you're shooting, let me zoom out just a bit. If you're shooting at just the right angle, you will pick up a little bit of the Statue of Liberty, which is over here. So you have a line of sight. Sometimes you will see it way out there in your image, so consider that as well. Let me turn on my Do Not Disturb real quick so we don't get more notices. Okay, so that's the first location. You can walk all the way down this park area. You can get similar views that are a little closer to the city down in this corner. Oh, by the way, lens. You can do this with most any kit lens. That image, the one I was showing earlier, was a 23 millimeter, a prime sort of lens. But you can do this with a regular kit lens. Anything from like a 16 to 50, anything in that range will do fine. As you see, that's 23. That is on a crop sensor, so that's a 1.5 crop factor. So that's about, if I do the math quickly in my head, that's about a 35 millimeter full frame view. So that's the equivalent. You might prefer to zoom in a bit more, or you might like it as that. But most any of the, lenses from kind of a, 18 to 50 millimeter will come in very handy for this. Okay. Now let's go back and look at another location here. When you come around this park area, or if you walk around the backside here, you will find, and let me switch to the satellite view real quick. It may help us just a bit here. You will notice from the satellite view there is an area right about here, and you'll notice some pylons from what I presume would be an old pier. And you will find photographers there around sunset. Maybe you'll find them at sunrise too. I haven't tried that. But around sunset, you'll find photographers here taking pictures, and for good reason. Let me shift to another one of my images, and we'll see if I can locate it. Yep. Okay, so this is the view you'll get from this location right about in here. Now this is actually the one where you may need a tripod. There's not a perfect place to set your camera. I think I used a small gorilla pod previously, kind of nestled it among the rocks. There are a lot of rocks here, both right here and up here, so depending on your preferred vantage down here, there may be other photographers. You may want to try something up here. So this may actually be one where a tripod could be handy for you. Similar setup on this, long exposure, that makes the water just sort of blur out. This may have even been, in fact, I don't know if I don't have it here, but it's f/13. This is also 23 millimeter sort of view on a crop sensor, about a 35 millimeter full frame view. Works out very nice. Sunset was going on, so that was nice. Although to the human eye, there wasn't much sunset left at all, but the camera picks that up. I would caution you that the view can be a little ugly until all these lights come on, until these lights are really noticeable. Once the lights are noticeable, then the view is really great. So there is probably about a 5 to 10 minute window where the lights are very nicely visible and there's just a little bit of sunset left. And I think I caught it at just the right moment. Now this vantage point, unlike the previous one, has these nice foreground elements to kind of pull your eye in. And give it a sense of context and scale. So that's handy in that location. Okay, so again, if we go back to the regular map view, what we're talking about is this location right here. So I just want to highlight these locations are all pretty close together. If you walked from the subway station, you came down here, there's Shake Shack, get a burger. Right here, nice views initially. You can then backtrack and walk to right about there, and you'll have nice views there. Now, there are other great views to be had. You can walk down to this corner. You can walk down to this pier. I don't have any of those prepared to show you, but those are also options. I tend not to go there quite as much. After photographing at this location, what you can do is backtrack a bit, come down, again, there's Shake Shack for sort of to ground you, under the Brooklyn Bridge, and you can sort of cut through this area. And all this area in here is nice, and I'll show you a couple of pictures from this area. And there's also a great spot right about here, what I think is called Pebble Beach. So let's flip over and see if I can show you some of those real quick. Let's take a look at this one, see if this is, yes, okay. So this is one I wanted to show you for sure. This is a spot I've come to many, many times. It is kind of famous. You'll even see it on movies sometimes. But it's good, even though people have done it, have your own version of it. Do something better. And so that location, again, just to be clear, is right down here at what they're calling Pebble Beach. Let me go to the satellite view and show you quickly what I'm referring to. You'll walk along here typically, and this area has become much more developed and very nice. You'll work your way through the little park, and you'll come to a set of essentially sitting locations. It's big stair steps down to the water. What I almost always do is I'll just sit down right about here. I'll set my camera right there on the concrete next to me, and I'll set up for the shot. Haven't really needed a tripod in this area. There'll be some people around, but usually you can navigate and get the view you want. Again, this was from just a few weeks ago. I've done this many times over the years. This again was 23 millimeter, which would be a 35 millimeter full frame sort of view. So you'll get a nice view of the carousel. Let me show you that again. And this is the carousel right here called Jane's Carousel. When I first started coming down here, that carousel was basically in pieces, stored in a warehouse somewhere over here. But in the years since, they've built a nice structure for it. Really nice view. Again, do something similar. I like to use maybe a +1 on the compensation exposure. 2-second self-timer, so I get my hands off the camera. It's sitting there on concrete. It should be pretty steady. You might want something under the lens to lift it up just a little bit. I often just use my lens cap. So take the lens cap off. I'll prop it under the lens a little bit between it and the concrete. It gives me just enough lift to frame the photo like I want. And again, f8, or this one here, yep, I did an f8. And probably about a 6 to 8 second exposure, something like that. You'll get a marvelous image. Okay, let's see what else I've got for you here. Let's go to this image here. Okay, let me show you where this is. I like this image. Now there's people in the scene, and if you don't mind that, I think it gives a nice sense of scale. You're looking at the Brooklyn Bridge. certainly Freedom Tower here. And I'll show you exactly where this spot is on the map. And it is basically right here at the tip of my arrow, right about here. So just to my left is Jane's Carousel. It will sometimes be turned on and cast some nice light. And this was actually handheld, F2, and no image stabilization, so ISO was cranked up pretty good. But you could either rest your camera on one of these benches or on the concrete here if you chose, or some other location. You don't have the same sort of flat post to put your camera on that you do have in some of the other locations. So maybe a tripod would be handy here. I tend not to use it. So I hope that might help you a little bit. Let me go back to another image. I think I've got one more to show. Okay, this one is a bit of a portrait, but I wanted to show this because I'll show you where this location is, and it might be helpful to you. Let's go back to the map view. So this area where it says Empire Fulton Ferry, there's just a large green space here, and as you can see there's a sidewalk that walks along the water here. And it's been a spot where I've tried to do portraits before, because what you have behind your subject is incredible lights of New York City. And if you have a lens, a nice portrait lens with a large aperture, so like an f2 or f1.8 or something, you can get a really nice portrait and the background will be just completely blurred out. And that's sort of what I was going for here. Those are the lights in New York City. So one of my colleagues and we were all down there, so I did a few portraits of folks. And you might think I was holding some artificial light or something, a little LED light. I've tried that. In this case, though, it was just the light from a street lamp. And it's not perfect light, it's not super soft, but it actually worked out pretty good. And again, I'll show you that location. It would be right in this area about here. So there's a street lamp. You can kind of find how it's hitting the ground and position your subject in that area. So anyway, those are a couple of locations. So let's just recap real quick. Take the A or the C, get off here at the High Street Station. Walk up Cadman Plaza, Old Fulton Street, go to Shake Shack, get a burger if you like, cross the street. Good first location is this corner right here. Then there's good locations really all along here. You might wish to come over here where you'll have the post, the old piers from the old dock, the old pylons I should say, from I guess the old pier. You may wish to walk back then under the Brooklyn Bridge here down Water Street just a bit. You can really turn at any of these locations. You might wish to walk all the way down Water Street, go to Pebble Beach first, get some nice views there. This corner is also nice, close to Jane's Carousel, and another location here. So again, one more quick view of the images, and just to show you that there's great potential, and none of this is really heavy or so demanding on gear. So this is a favorite image. That was from the first location I mentioned. This from that spot along the water where there is a street light that may offer just enough lighting for you. This one close to Jane's Carousel. This one from that Pebble Beach area. You get the nice rocks in the foreground, nice views, lots of interesting things. And finally, then this one by those pylons, the piers. That's kind of the furthest down that I described in this video. So anyway, I hope all this might help you just a little bit. I like to see folks enjoy the area and get some nice images. If you have any questions or you want to reach out and touch base and just ask anything that you think I can help you with, please let me know. Again, if you like the videos, give us a thumbs up and subscribe. We'll try to produce more. Thanks. Have a great day.